The Denver Broncos stunned the playoff-bound Los Angeles Chargers in their home finale 31-28. Why did the Chargers play the starters? That's not even the major question of this game. The Broncos will head into the offseason on a positive note despite an up-and-down season. Who gets game balls? And is there optimism for Broncos Country going into 2023? You get that and much more on today's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, Broncos Country? Welcome into a brand new episode, Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. Just want to say thank you so much to everybody in Broncos Country for tuning in and making Locked on Broncos your first listen of the day, free and available everywhere you get your podcasts in audio format or whether you watch on YouTube. We have you covered every single day, all year long. From the South Stands to the End Zone, I'm your host, as always, Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports, joined alongside, as always, by my good friend, my co-host, Sayre Bedinger, site expert, predominantlyorange.com. Sayre, my friend, you know what? We get to have Victory Monday one last time. We haven't had too many of them so far this season for this Denver Broncos team, but they end the season on a high note, stunning the Los Angeles Chargers, who are playoff bound, 31-28. And I think the first thing we're going to hear, they didn't really stun them from Chargers fans, right? We're going to get. Here's the reality of the situation. This is a game where the Chargers didn't need to play their starters. A team that's in the playoffs, they did that, and there's some other repercussions that obviously they'll discuss. You can check out Locked on Chargers for that. If you're a Chargers fan, you should be there anyways. But to me, it's like, oh yeah, the Broncos did stun the Chargers at this point in time because they played their starters, and they played them into the fourth quarter, and it was good to see Denver fight the way that they did, man, because this, I tell you what, an entertaining game to go out on here in 2023.
Well, it really was, Cody, and to your point exactly. I mean, there was a moment early in the game where I was kind of thinking, man, this feels like flashbacks to the preseason, right? We had Matt Henningsen and Jaquan McMillan and a number of other players out there on the field. Brandon Johnson, Jalen Virgil. You're seeing all these guys run around out there for the Denver Broncos playing, and obviously the Broncos did have some of their starters out there still, and a good percentage. But yeah, you're right. The Chargers played their starting lineup. It was Mr. 30-40 touchdowns, however many he has, Austin Eckler over the last two seasons. It was Justin Herbert. It was Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, the whole cast of characters, Derwin James. It was everybody out there for the Chargers in this game, and unfortunately that came to bite them in the butt. I feel for our guys over there at Locked on Chargers that probably have to really address that in their post-game podcast. But for the Denver Broncos, this kind of started off really great, right? An opening drive touchdown for the offense, and then kind of another dry spell, as we've come to expect almost from this team throughout the remainder of the first quarter into the second quarter. And then there at the end of the first half, like you and I were talking about before we even started recording, Jerry Rosburg, the guy that was brought in, remember, for game management, to help the team call timeouts in the right situation, to make sure they're managing the clock well. What did he do? He did what he was hired to do in the first place. He managed that dang clock and got Russell Wilson the ball. And sure enough, Russell, after not getting Jerry Jeudy involved the entire first half, he throws a long shot to him down the field, sets the Broncos up, Latavius Murray, et cetera, and there we go. It was finally a game, and the Broncos had some life, and that life continued into the second half, and they played pretty impressive, Cody. I would say it felt like Russ was cooking a little bit, dare I say.
Well, you leave a great point here, too. And obviously with Rosburg, 26 seconds was left. You had two timeouts. First play was that dump off to Latavius on a screenplay, who took it 20-something yards. Then, as you mentioned, Russ rolled out to his left and just uncorked a beautiful throw to Jerry Jeudy, caught it and was out of bounds at the 2-yard line. And then Eric Tomlinson, unsung hero guy who doesn't say much, comes in with the touchdown. And really, the Broncos going to halftime, I mean, there's momentum. They've got, they tied the game up, and all of a sudden they get the ball back coming out of halftime. This is what we wanted to see from Denver all year long. And, to be honest with you, kind of looking at it in hindsight in the 2020 perspective, I mean, for Denver in a situation how bad they've been this season offensively, for them to put up over 24 points again and to finish the game with 31 points, it is great to see. You love that because, as you mentioned, there were times in this game where the old school offense started to creep back in. But, man, there's so many guys I feel like we could highlight. I just don't think we have enough time on today's show to go through every single one. But it does set up a really nice slogan for 2023 for Russell Wilson. And, Sayre, like I said, you coined the phrase. I'm going to let you say it.
Well, people just got to realize this is tongue in cheek, okay? Don't get offended or don't blast me in the comments, but I'm here to say, let's ride great again in 2023, Cody. I'm all for it. I'll print up the t-shirts, make let's ride great again. I'm here for it. You know what? The Broncos, they beat a good team. I think that's what's exciting about this. We went into the game preview kind of talking like, well, it would be great if they could win regardless of what the Chargers do in terms of playing their starters or not, because, man, the Broncos just need a good game. They need to go out and put forth some things on tape that we can hang our hats on going into the offseason. They did it against the Chargers starters. And not only that, but you look over the course of the season, the teams the Broncos beat, 3 out of the 3. I mean, they didn't win many games, of course. We know this. We're not jaded by any means, but they did beat the 49ers, the Jaguars, and the Chargers, all of whom are going to be competing in the playoffs here. So it's kind of interesting to see the fact that, this Broncos team beat a few playoff teams, beat arguably the best team in the NFC, and, beat a division champ. I mean, it's take it for what it's worth. But what I'm saying is that we've seen, just as we saw in the 49ers game, just as we saw in the Jaguars game, we saw glimpses of how good this team could be, Cody. And I think as we're going to talk and touch on later, that kind of gives you hope going forward.
Broncos Country, we are eager for your thoughts. Let us know how you felt watching the Broncos beat the Los Angeles Chargers 31-28 to close out the season. Drop them in the YouTube comment section down below if you're watching us, or you can tweet us on Twitter at Cody Roark NFL, at Sayre Bedinger, at Locked On Broncos. But Broncos Country, on today's episode of the show, we're going to hand out game balls. Now, we're going to do things a little different. Sayre and I, we each get 2 game balls we're going to hand out. Broncos Country, they get a game ball that they want to hand out. We took the poll, and we got the results from Broncos Country. We'll dive into that on today's episode, Lockdown Broncos. This episode of the show is brought to you by our friends at Tommy John, and winter mornings are brutal. So here's my tip for tackling the day in comfort. Grab new Tommy John loungewear and take cozy wherever you go. And when you start the year in Tommy John, you're that much more comfortable, so you can do everything better. Tommy John loungewear, pajamas, and underwear have dozens of comfort innovations like the luxuriously soft tri-blend and micromodal fabrics with 4-way stretch and no lint balls or fuzz. With over 20 million pairs sold and thousands of 5-star reviews, people love Tommy John. That's why Tommy John doesn't have customers, they have fanatics. Plus, it's all backed by Tommy John's best pair you'll ever wear or its free guarantee, so you can get 20% off your first order at TommyJohn.com/lockedon. 20% off right now at TommyJohn.com/lockedon. See site for details. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp Therapy Online, and unfortunately, life doesn't come with a user manual, so when it's not working for you, it's normal to feel stuck. Therapists are trained to help you figure out the cause of challenging emotions and learn productive coping skills, which makes therapy the closest thing to a guided tour of the complex engine called you. BetterHelp has connected over 3 million people with licensed therapists. It's convenient, secure, and accessible anywhere, 100% online. Everyone deserves to feel their best, and BetterHelp makes it easier to get started. And as the world's largest therapy service, they've matched millions of people with professionally licensed and vetted therapists available 100% online. No waiting rooms, no traffic, no endless searching for the right therapist. You get that at BetterHelp, and I've utilized BetterHelp in the past, and I found it very beneficial to be able to do therapy on my time whenever I want to, at the palm of my hand, on my phone, and I filled out a form, and all it did was it connected me to a therapist that I matched with, and I vibed really well with my therapist. If you don't vibe with yours, you can change therapists at any time. Get unstuck with BetterHelp. Learn more and save 10% off your first month at BetterHelp.com/lockedon. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, Sayre, on today's episode, Lockdown Broncos, we're continuing our discussion as the Broncos conclude the season on a high note with a 31-28 victory over the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, for Denver, they put up over 471 total yards of offense, and a lot of that coming through the air. We saw more explosive plays from Russell Wilson, Jerry Jeudy, and company, which now leads us to our question that we put out there. Let's get to our game balls for Sunday's season finale here. First things first, we're going to start things off with Broncos Country's game ball that they handed it out. We put out a tweet on Twitter, and Broncos Country responded in resounding fashion, as always. Sayre, I feel like it was really hard to pinpoint just one person to get a game ball from Broncos Country because so many Broncos fans were saying Jerry Rosburg, Jerry Jeudy. I mean, in the same sentence, they're saying, hey, we're handing game balls to both of these guys. So you know what? We're going to let the people ride with it. Jerry Rosburg and Jerry Jeudy each get a game ball from Broncos Country. And I tell you what, Jerry Rosburg has instilled something different in this team in the 2 weeks he's had to prepare them, right? And I talked to players, and I asked about the very beginning. They said at first we were just like, oh, our head coach just got fired. What the heck's going on? And you got this new guy coming in, and he's changing the way that you've been doing things all season long. Some guys are like, hey, this is a weird spot to be in. But you know what? He said, we worked the hardest we did. He pushed us, and it paid off. And I think that's a testament to Jerry Rosburg, a great, great coach. Not necessarily a guy you really want to invest in the whole X's and O's aspect of it, but a guy who can lead a football team deserving of a game ball. And Jerry Jeudy, I mean, Sayre, need we say more? I mean, for him, he has now finally, he has a new career high in receiving yards in his career. I believe it's at 972. He was just a little bit shy. You want to see a couple more touches of getting to that 1,000 on the season. But considering where things were at and how many games he had to miss with that ankle injury, for Jerry to put up this type of production, Sayre, I mean, is great. And in this game, he finished 5 catches, $154. And he also had some really, really cool plays on the ground in the run game as well for the Broncos. I think these are two good game ball picks here by the avid listeners in Broncos Country.
I love it. It's a great day on Sunday to be named Jerry, I guess, unless you're Jerry Jones, who's Cowboys, who dropped from potentially being the number 1 seed. So I love those picks from Broncos Country, Cody. I love it. Jerry Rosburg deserves. I feel like we'll talk about him more over the offseason as we look back on the 2022 season in hindsight. The job that he's done in less than 2 weeks. I mean, it's been fantastic. It's been the breath of fresh air that we really hoped Nathaniel Hackett could be, right? He's been very positive, but also very poised and done a great job managing the team. And of course, Jerry Jeudy. I mean, he has been the Broncos' best offensive player. How many times have we said that on this podcast? So for anybody that's listening for the first time, this is not the first time we're talking about Jerry Jeudy being the best player on the offense for the Broncos this year. And I think at this point, that almost goes without saying. And Cody, before I get into my first game ball, for me personally, for the day, I just want to give a quick honorable mention. I noticed this, the ball behind me over here. I just remembered that ball has a signature on it from one Peyton Hillis. And I remember getting that autograph from Peyton when he was a rookie in the NFL. And I was just a high school kid, and I thought it was so cool to get to meet him. Obviously, we've heard the stories and things that he's done to save his children from drowning in the swimming accident and things like that. So thoughts, prayers, and well wishes for Peyton Hillis and his family. But to the game on Sunday, my first game ball, Cody, is going to go to the offensive coordinator, a guy that I questioned, what is this guy's role on the team? What is it that you even, I think we even said that maybe even on the air, like, what is it that you do here, Justin Outen? I for sure have said that multiple times. And I know you wonder. I mean, Nathaniel Hackett was the guy initially calling plays. He initially wanted to hire Adam Stenavich, right, to be the OC from Green Bay. Didn't get him. Then when Nathaniel Hackett gives up play calling duties, it goes to Clint Kubiak, the guy who had experience doing that before. Justin Outen comes in these last 2 games. The Broncos put up 24 against Kansas City, a season high 31 against the Los Angeles Chargers. Could have been even more if they would have given Jaquan McMillan a pick. I think, Cody, they've really had an opportunity here to just kind of, put the pedal to the metal, for lack of a better term there. Justin Outen deserves a lot of credit. I love the way he got creative with the 2 running back system in the backfield there, getting Russ some touches, getting the ball to both Courtland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. Remember, in this game, Jerry went off for 150 plus in the passing game, and then Courtland had a touchdown. So we talked about that as well last week, about how getting both of those guys involved in the same game plan, not impossible. And Justin Outen showed us that. So kudos to him for going from what is it that you do around here to being like, wow, should you have been doing this all along?
I think that's the question everybody's asking, right? And unfortunately, I think we're all looking at the writing on the wall. I mean, more than likely, he may not be back around next year for this Broncos team. So a lot of that to keep an eye on here. Ultimately, for me, my game ball, I'm going to hand it to a guy who's an undrafted rookie free agent, a guy who, was on the Broncos training camp roster, hardly played in the preseason, and he got his first career NFL start on Sunday, which was a complete surprise because we all thought it was going to be Lamar Jackson. But Jaquan McMillan, I think, deserves an absolute big-time shout-out because he got the start opposite of Patrick Surtain. I think we can all agree he was robbed on what should have been an interception. That right there was a clear cut. I mean, it was identical to the one Patrick Surtain had against Mahomes and the Chiefs just several weeks ago at Empower Field in Mile High. But you know what? Sean Hockley is the guy. They're like, we're not going to give that to an undrafted rookie cornerback. What are you talking about there? But, another thing, like coverage. Early on in this game, there was like a 3rd and 3, and he had a one-on-one against Mike Williams downfield on a vertical route, played it perfectly, got into his hip pocket, played in phase, and knocked the ball out of Williams' hand. On top of that, he was an anchor against the run. He came up in run support and tackled well. Oh, and he also had a tackle for a loss beyond the line of scrimmage, tracking it from the backside. It was a stretch play that went opposite of him. He tracked it down the end line of the line of scrimmage, made the tackle. A lot of heart here, but this is what you like to see, right? This goes to like that roster development. It's not always about the draft picks. It's about the guys you have in your roster that have been just working and practicing on the practice squad and developing. I think Jaquan McMillan made a pretty good statement here today for the Broncos, and with George Paton still in place for Denver, I think he'll probably have a futures contract here with this team.
I think so too, Cody. He deserves a spot on the roster going forward. He is one of those guys that, remember when he was signed as an undrafted player, you look at his college production, I believe he had 12 interceptions in 3 seasons at East Carolina. And we were sitting there like, how does this guy who is an All-American with 12 picks not get drafted, right? So great to see him finally get a chance to play and shine. And it wasn't in the nickel. Remember, that was another thing kind of assumed based on his size and measurables that, well, he'll just slide in and play in the nickel quicker than fast, not big enough to really match up with the Mike Williams of the world. And then sure enough, he goes out and does it. So I love that game ball pick as well. My other one is going to go to another member of the secondary, kind of much less of a sleeper pick, I suppose, but somebody who I think just deserves all the credit in the world and deserves more publicity than he even already gets because, Cody, Justin Simmons is that dude. He is insanely good. I mean, the guy is a ball magnet. I don't know how he does it other than the fact to say that, man, he just knows how to be in the right place at the right time pretty much all the time. 2 forced fumbles in this game and just always fighting. That the first forced fumble that he had, I had no idea. Like Justin Simmons, he has a knack for creating turnovers. He has a knack for getting you big plays in game-changing, game-altering moments because the Chargers could have scored easily. I mean, within the next couple of plays there before that turnover. So to see Simmons go out there and do what he does on a weekly basis, the interceptions, the career high in interceptions this season, now multiple forced fumbles added to the mix. I don't know the official number, Cody. It's got to be about 9 or 10 total turnovers that he's been part of, 10 turnovers this season, which he didn't even play. Remember, he missed 5 games. So just keep in perspective,
All pro.
This guy is all pro. He is all everything. He's the, I know Dalton Reisner was it this year, but he's Walter Payton Man of the Year type guy, all pro, Pro Bowl leader, everything. And he backs it up on the field time and time again. He's a game changer, and he's got my last game ball of the 2022-2023 season.
Pretty good guy to give a game ball to. I'm going to close things out here with my second game ball here. I'm going to hand it to Courtland Sutton. Courtland Sutton, and the reason I say that is because when you look at how Jerry Jeudy has emerged with big-time production the last several weeks here, so many people will overlook what Courtland Sutton has done, right? Because they also will look at it, and some people think that me saying Jerry Jeudy is wide receiver one is slandering or talking bad about Courtland Sutton. It's not. If anything, it could also be a compliment, because you and I have talked about this. These guys could be the number one guy any week, right? One week it could be Courtland, who's going off for 12 catches for 150 yards. The next week it could be Jerry. The next week it could be Tim Patrick. Next week it could be KJ Hamler. Courtland Sutton has done so much of the dirty work, right? And it's not necessarily showing up in the stat sheet from catches. He's had several catches, and obviously in Sunday's game, he had 3 catches on the day for 33 yards, including the 20-yard touchdown. He was wide open. Beautiful design by the Broncos offense there, by the way. But also in the blocking department, right? That's an area that I feel like Courtland at the beginning of the season kind of struggled with in consistency. But I thought Courtland Sutton, I thought Jerry Jeudy, I thought the wide receivers had a really good day blocking on the perimeter. Courtland is a guy who's been grinding, he's been busting his tail, and he's also been dealing with some injuries this season as well. Courtland is a guy that I think deserves a lot more credit than he gets credit for. Not a lot of people talk about that. And with Jerry's big game, over 150 yards, people are going to say, oh, Jerry obviously is, a guy that's making all these plays. And people are going to say, where's the big plays from Courtland Sutton? Courtland is making them in other capacities, other facets of the game. So for me, I'm going to hand a game ball out to Courtland Sutton, who is, this season has not gone how he or the Broncos have expected, but he is an impact player. He can create opportunities. And I think we've seen in the last 3 or 4 weeks, Sayre, the way that the Broncos have been moving these guys around, I think is beneficial to not only just Jerry Jeudy, but also to Courtland Sutton. I think it opens up opportunities for both of those guys. Broncos Country, let us know who your game ball recipients are down below in the YouTube comment section if you're watching on YouTube, or tweet us on Twitter if you're listening on your favorite podcast and provider, at Cody Roark NFL, at Sayre Bedinger, at Locked On Broncos. But with this win on Sunday and now the offseason approaching, do Broncos Country have enough on their plate to have some optimism for 2023? You'll get that on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. This episode of the show is brought to you by our friends at Ultimate Football GM. And if you've ever dreamed of becoming an NFL GM and managing your football franchise, well, let me tell you, you can do that from the palm of your hand. It can come true, and this game is definitely for you. You get to manage every strategic aspect of your team. You get to play through the season and lead your team to glory, and you as the GM, you're responsible for hiring the right coaches and coordinators, trading players, making draft picks, and navigating your franchise through free agency and the draft and all the ups and downs that a season brings. All this in a challenging and realistic game world. Ultimate Football GM is completely free and playable offline. Play on the go as you want and when you want to. Locked On Broncos listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo Locked On in all caps in the game store. That's Locked On in all caps, so make sure you check it out today. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the app stores. That's ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM. Start your dynasty today. Heading into the offseason, is there any reason for optimism for Broncos Country heading into 2023? Sayre Bedinger and myself, we believe there are plenty of things to be optimistic about while the Broncos approach a time in Dove Valley where there will be a lot of change this offseason. This is just a friendly reminder. Locked On Broncos, even though the season is over, we have you covered every single day all year long, because for the true fan, there is never an offseason. Continue to make Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day. Sayre, let's talk about this. I think that Broncos fans, this was a big win, right? Because they played a team that played their starters, a team that is in the playoffs, and they beat them. That is something you can hang your hat on. That is something, okay, hey, you beat a playoff team. Now, while the Broncos can't progress further, they're not going to play next week, you can build on things. Building blocks are important in the NFL. One thing I want to highlight with 2023, why I think there is reason for optimism. Sayre, I think we've seen the ownership group is willing to spend whatever they can to make the Broncos better, and Sunday's game was a great advantage of that, because Greg Penner replaced the entire field before this game, paid $400,000 for a brand new playing surface because he was not happy with how the field looked the last time they had a home game, with how beat up it was, how used it was, with all the other high school sports being played there and everything, with the season. To me, this tells me that, okay, ownership, they're going to do whatever they can to make things right here in Broncos Country. I think that alone should give fans optimism.
It should, because he's showing aggressiveness. I mean, when you're spending $400,000, you got one game left, and you're saying, "Hey, let's get a new field in." I don't care if it's before the next year. I don't care if we have one game left. I love that mentality from Greg Penner and the ownership group, and just the ownership group in general, Cody. I mean, you look over the course of the last just few months, even if you want to go back to the Russell Wilson extension, or even if you want to go all the way back to the fact they spent $4.65 billion to get the team, then you spend $245 million to extend Russell Wilson, then you go ahead and spend $100 million on stadium renovations and things like that, and $100,000 to send the School of Mines kids to the championship game. Let's do it. Let's send them there on behalf of the Denver Broncos. They are going to be highly aggressive, which is why I think we've seen these rumors turned on their heads. Because I think you and I would both say when Nathaniel Hackett was first fired and those betting odds came out that Sean Payton was the number one favorite at the time, I think both you and I kind of just like laughed that off a little bit, because it was like, well, Sean Payton has never really seemed like that realistic of a. But now we hear him speak, it sounds like he's a very realistic target potentially for the Denver Broncos, and because they're going to be aggressive. So I think that is one of the number one reasons. I think also you got to look at the last handful of games this season. I know the Rams game was terrible, but dating back to that Chiefs game where he had the concussion, I think Russell Wilson showed some things down the stretch this season that give you hope that, okay, this year was an anomaly. This year was a complete outlier. It's not that Russ is cooked. I think he still has plenty of cooking left to do, right? So you look at these last 4 or 5 games and you see the guy that we thought we were getting from Seattle, the moon balls, and even in just the Chargers game, Cody, the moon balls to Freddie Swain and Jerry Jeudy, and the touchdown to Cortland Sutton, just finding him after scrambling, being able to get outside the pocket and make plays. There's so many things that we saw from Russ in the last month and a half that lead me to believe better days are ahead, because I think you and I would agree. It's just hard to accept that a guy who's been a top 10 quarterback for the entirety of his career, right, has just all of a sudden become, worse than most quarterbacks, right? And I think that's putting it nicely. It was a bad season from Russ. It was a bad season for the Denver Broncos. But what we saw in glimpses throughout the season, but more so consistently at the end of the season, was Russell playing his game, playing confidently, doing the things that we thought he was going to do. Not perfect, but much, much better.
And he and Jerry Jeudy have built a fantastic relationship and chemistry, and I'm excited to see how it is with Tim Patrick being added to the mix. I had a chance to talk with Tim Patrick after the game, and man, he's been a big part of them behind the scenes, like with these receivers. He's been a mentor. He's been there. He's been vocal. He's been helpful with that wide receiver room, and he's excited to come back as well. He's making tremendous progress. Outside of that, too, there's a couple areas I want to address before we close out today's episode, Locked On Broncos. It's noted here, like, obviously for this team, there are areas that are in desperate need of improvement, right? I think we can all acknowledge that. But I also think it's worth noting that we saw this Broncos team play better in all facets on offense, defense, and special teams when better coaching was implemented. And these were changes that were made after Nathaniel Hackett was dismissed, which, it stinks because it's kind of a huge indictment on really how bad things were with Nathaniel Hackett. That Jerry Rosburg can come in just 13 days and all of a sudden things look night and day different for Denver. So I think better coaching is obviously something that is there, and Denver can get that. They're looking for that going into the offseason. I also wanted to challenge a narrative. A lot of people have said, the Broncos defense has regressed. Can we keep in mind how many injuries the Broncos defense has had? I mean, no Randy Gregory. The last 2 games, you have no DJ Jones. I mean, no Damari Mathison's game. You lose Ronald Darby. I mean, you had Justin Simmons out for 5 games this season. You lose Caden Stearns, who is an impact player in your personnel packages. Draymond Jones, who is, missed the last several weeks as well, and was on season-ending injured reserve. That's a big factor into why Denver's defense has given up some plays. I don't think they've necessarily regressed. I think the personnel matters. Not having much of a pass rush presence has been something that has obviously impacted them. That helps when you have Draymond, DJ. And yeah, maybe we can analyze that in the offseason about edge rusher and where Denver needs to go with that and seeing if they can make any improvements there. But the notion that Denver's defense has suddenly just regressed, I don't believe that, because obviously they had more takeaways and the offense is putting up more points. They were playing complementary football. So I wanted to challenge that narrative here at the end of today's Locked On Broncos. The Broncos season ends with a positive note, a 31-28 victory over the Los Angeles Chargers. If you're a Chargers fan, you must be feeling some kind of way about how things looked for you prior to the playoffs, as obviously we know the Jaguars and the Chargers will face off during the playoff weekend, wild card weekend. We all wish the Broncos were playing, but you know what? We have a lot to look forward to, hoping that they can get there next season. Drop your comments down below if you're watching on YouTube, or tweet us on Twitter your thoughts on this episode. Let us know at Cody Roark NFL, at Sayre Bedinger, at Lockdown Broncos. But once again, Broncos Country, thank you so much for everything this season. Even though the Broncos season is over, we still have you covered every single day, all year long, because for the true fan, there is never an off season. We'll see you tomorrow for a brand new episode, Lockdown Broncos.